Alright, new year, new challenge. This time it's a dollar store build, $10 USD or your regional equivalent. I took a good look around mine and came up with this bird feeder, which I think has a kind of interesting shape to it, and we're going to see what I can make with that. So, first step is obviously getting this thing apart. Fortunately, they didn't glue it, it just pops apart easily enough. Second part, cut the little string that's holding it all together, and then it turns out there's a line of grooves on top of the roof that fits the base pretty easily. Second thing I picked up at the dollar store was the playset this little toy gun came in. That was $4 Canadian, and the bird feeder was $4 Canadian, so I'm still well under the 10 USD for the regional. I did need to take the toy gun apart because I wanted to get rid of some of the internals. Fortunately, I was able to find a screwdriver small enough, and after that, it was a matter of pulling it apart, or so I thought. There was this little tab on the top that I needed to get out of the way in order to properly get it apart. Then, I needed to set about removing the handle. That was the part that would make this most look like a gun, and I wanted to use it as a little kind of smokestack thing off the side of the bird feeder. So, bit of cutting with my saw, and then a little bit more cutting with my knife, and we've removed almost everything. There was still this little sort of thing on the back where the plunger used to sit, and I needed to carefully cut that away, which is why I'm wearing cut-resistant gloves here. But a little work with the knife, and I did eventually get that pretty much removed and scraped off. This is going to be on the bottom, so I'm not too fussed about appearances. Reassembled the thing with the little orange thing in place so that I'd still have the top of the stack, but none of the other internals necessary. And then got out some wooden dowels. These are from the dollar store as well, as you can tell. And I only needed one of them, and the pack was only $1.50 in the first place, so I think I'm still good here. Alright, now this is the hard part. This is the part that I was really worried about, is that in order to make this bond strong enough, I needed to drill through the bird feeder. And if this was that super hard, cheap, splintery plastic, I don't know if I'd been able to do this, but fortunately it was a slightly softer kind with a little bit more give to it. With a little bit of masking tape in place to help prevent splintering, it was time to break out the power tools. Okay, jokes aside, you can see that I'm running the drill a lot more slowly than its max speed. I'm using quite a large drill bit, so I didn't want to go too fast, and I've left this bit on normal speed so that you can see and hear just how slowly I'm running the drill in order to get through this plastic without shattering it. And we're still not done. The drill did eventually start to bite the holes once I had most of the way through, but there were still these little bits of plastic around the edges of the holes that I needed to clear out. Fortunately, the drill did make the hole big enough that I could complete the cleanup work with just my knife. If you try to repeat this step at home, it is very important to use the tape, to go slowly with the drill, and to make sure you stop trying to drill once it starts to bite into the plastic and grab it. Alright, so funny thing, this cutting off of little cardboard bits and cutting those to size and making a sort of scaffold facade thing here to cover that giant hole on the back of the toy gun where the handle used to be was legitimately the most time-consuming part of this build. This is due in no small part to the fact that I had to make holes for the dowels onto the cardboard as well, and I didn't feel like just using the drill for these. That was a bit overkill, so I had to use the knife and go slowly and carefully to cut the holes out manually. The upshot of doing this is that when I do attach the dowels later, the bond between the two different components of the build is going to be very strong. If you had flat surfaces to attach to, you could achieve a similar strength by drilling smaller holes with just the pin vise, much easier, and then using screws from the other side of the bird feeder, or whatever it is you've got. But mine was a slanted one on a slope, so I couldn't really do that if I didn't want them to be, level with the ground, and had to think of more creative solutions involving drilling hard plastic. Not the greatest idea perhaps, but hey, it worked out pretty well here. And now you can see I'm completing my cardboard scaffolding by just finding ways to cover up a few of those little drill holes on the gun. Then in a rather serendipitous moment, I discovered that a Pringles can lid was actually the perfect size to fit on top of this bird feeder here and make a little round roof. Otherwise, I would have had to cut something to shape. The Pringles lid being the perfect fit worked great. It did sag a little on the top though, so I did cut a circle of cardboard just to make that top flat. and then the hot glue was doing terrible things to the cheap plastic of the Pringles lid, so I had to turn that upside down and squish it down a little bit to get it to adhere to that cardboard. I roughed up the plastic of the bird feeder using a sanding block in order to give the rattle can spray primer I was going to use to base coat this maximum adhesion, and then I made a little window thing for that sort of gap in the bird feeder where the seeds would come out, using some drywall tape, which is fantastic stuff for adding texture to cardboard, and a strip of cardboard. This was secured into place with hot glue at the top. I did try using super glue to secure the rest of it into place, but it wasn't really having it. The super glue that I had was too thin, it was just running down the sides. Fortunately, hot glue does give you enough working time that I was able to hide the place where the cardboard wrapped back around and joined itself behind one of those little supports. Then, more hot glue to secure the Pringles can lid on top of this whole mess. Hot glue does tend to be a little bit thick and chunky, but in most of the places I was using it on this build, it was hidden pretty well by the way that the build was constructed, and worked fine. If you're really concerned about places where the glue is going to be visible, and I do have one on this build, then hot glue might not be the greatest choice. But it is quick, it works well on a variety of different materials, and if you have somewhere to hide it, like the interior of those dowel holes, works great. This one spot, the base where I'm attaching the bird feeder to its former roof, is the place where I think I could have done a little bit more. If I did this build again, I would definitely put like a shoelace or something decorative kind of around that hot glue bond at the base of the tower, just to help hide it a little bit more than what I ended up having on the final build. I think it still looks okay, but that is the one thing that I'm not super happy with on this, and if I did that again, I would definitely find a way to hide that better. But with the main build done, it's on to begreebling, and here is the final piece that I picked up from the dollar store for this, some little plastic toy dinosaur transformer things. These were held together with friction alone, very easy to pull them apart and use them for covering up screw holes on the toy gun and adding some more detail here and there. Like the roof of the tower, which is looking a little bit barren, isn't it? Let's fix that. This marks the only use of my bits box on this build. Everything else was sourced from the dollar store or materials I had lying around. Now it was finally time to give my cheap paints a workout. Some artist's acrylic to put down a nice brown muddy base coat for this, and then some really super cheap craft paints that I had kicking about. Yes, this is two different colors here. These paints do not mix well. I don't know what it is about these things, but even with all the mixing I'm giving them here, what you're going to end up with is that sort of blue with little splotches of green in it here and there. Fortunately, this is an effect that I like and it's easy to make use of. Now I'm applying this paint with this makeup brush because that will add texture and help avoid brush strokes, doing it in big splotches like that. You can see, no brush strokes on the whole thing. Then, nice dry brush with some actual model paints onto the bits that are going to be metallic, just as a little base coat, and a few more dabs of that paint onto the main tower to simulate areas where the paint is chipped and fallen away. At this stage of the painting process, you might be thinking, wow, what you're doing looks really ugly, Destro, but not to worry. The wash stage will fix everything. One last thing to do though before we get to the wash stage is that the tower looks a little bit plain and needs a little bit of decoration, and what would be simpler than adding some patented Lich King freehand to it. Or in this case, I'm going to be using a stencil. And I wanted to put down a little bit of tape just to act as a guide for a stencil, because I found in the past that being able to line up the letters on this stencil without something in place so you know where they should go is actually kind of hard. And here I'm just proving once again that you can use a stencil without having an airbrush. Just, hold it in place and swipe your brush back and forth over it. Get all the letters in place. There we go. Peel off the tape. Oh yeah. And then, of course, we need to know what number this relay is, and what better number than 42. What is this a relay for? Are there actually 41 more of these? I don't know, it just sounded cool in my head. Now, onto the washes, and I did actually have a little bit more of serendipity happen here, in that the cheap craft paints were slightly reactivated by the extreme liquidity of my homemade washes that I've just kind of poured and slathered over top of them everywhere. And in places where there was a lot of water dripping down and I was swiping the brush over it, some of the craft paint started to chip and lift up on its own without me having used any chipping medium on it. This does actually add quite well to the weathering on the final piece, and if I'd thought to use chipping medium, I might have done that in the first place, but I managed to get some natural chipping without even needing to. Of course, black wash is not sufficient. We need to get some brown in there as well, here and there, just to give it a lot of nice variation to it. But this had covered up my nice lettering that I had put on there. It was really hard to see with the washes in place. So I grabbed my paints and went back over it kind of very roughly, not being precise at all, just being very sort of haphazard and slapdash with the brush movements on here to give the appearance of very worn and weathered and chipped away kind of paint on this thing. We do not want this to be clean. This has been sitting outside for Emperor only knows how long. Though, I suppose you could use this as a generic sci-fi piece as well. There's nothing on this in particular that screams 40k, except for maybe one of the greebles on the top. But it's fine, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's generic. It's great. Let's go. Rust. Get a little piece of sponge and some orange paint and just start dabbing that all over the metallic bits. And I also went ahead and dabbed this onto some of the places on the main tower where I had used a sort of heavier chipping effect. Then grabbed some rust wash just to give those orange patches a little bit extra. They weren't looking the greatest just kind of on their own, so blend them into the surrounding metallics with a little bit of wash, and then take that same wash and use it to add some nice streaks anywhere that I think it would look good. You can just be very random and natural with this. It will look a lot better if it doesn't look like it's been planned and it looks like it's something that's just kind of naturally happened over time where the rust has started to set in. Finally, I wanted to add a last couple little details just to make the greebles on the top stand out. I think I could have maybe added a few more conduits and cables and things up here to tie all the greebling together, but you know, I was in a rush and it's a challenge build. I might revisit it at some point and take care of that, but just a few simple little details to bring everything together, and now it's time for big reveal. This was a pretty fun build to do, and overall I'm very happy with how it came out, so thanks to Drew from Ninetail Miniatures for putting this together. Check out the other collaborators in the description, but for now, that's it for me. I've been Destro, you've been great, and I'll see you next time.